Sophie Nicholson from news agency AFB. I've mentioned it already. At AFB, she is the Deputy Chief Editor Digital Verification at AFB Fact Check. And according to your Twitter or the AFB Fact Check Twitter channel and various other sources, AFB Fact Check is, quote, the world's biggest network of fact checkers covering more than 80 countries. So that's quite impressive and quite a lot. I haven't done the count. I haven't verified that claim, so maybe you can do that. And also, like Reuters as well, AFP is also part of this Facebook partnership program. And we may hear a little bit about that as well. I'm very grateful that Sophie is with us to share sort of some of her insights in how they work at AFP, whether the same challenges exist as they do in Reuters. And of course, we are also interested in finding out what technologies, and Hazel has mentioned it, you're using the INVIT/WeVerify too, because that is something that is being or has been developed in INVIT and is continued to be and further enhanced in WeVerify. And as AFP is also playing a leading role in the development, I really wonder how high this tool ranks in your tool assessment box. So thank you very much again, Sophie, for being here. But now I shut up and leave the floor to you. And I'm curious about what you have to tell us and the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just put my screen up. Can you see that there?
Yes, so, we see it. Beautiful.
You see it? Okay. So yeah, no, thank you very much. And yeah, Hazel, that was obviously there's a lot of similarities in how we work. You know, we're global news agencies, and a lot of the tools that Hazel mentioned are tools that I'm going to focus on in a little bit more detail, just with a few examples of how we use them in our work. So, as Jochen said. We started in 2017 in France around the presidential elections, looking at fact checking, again, growing out of a digital verification UGC team. We started to realize that there was more and more false information that we needed to pay attention to. And now we are in, as you said, in more than 80 countries with more than 100 people. And also in more than 20 languages. So it's quite a complex operation now that works alongside our bureaus around the world. So it's very much something that's integrated in our global operations. We have fact checkers in different bureaus working alongside correspondents, video journalists, etc. And the difference with the fact-checking team is that we have senior editors who oversee operations in each country and language, but we also have a lot of younger people, and the majority of them are under 40. And they're hired for different skills, technical skills, digital skills. That's not the only criteria, but obviously it's very useful for us. It complements the other reporting that we do, and they bring languages. They're working in languages, actually publishing in languages that we don't publish in on the newswire. So that also helps in terms of interacting with the public, because a lot of the way we work in fact checking is to do with interacting with people online or offline to verify information. I just wanted to just quickly give an idea of what's going on with fact checking in general. We've grown, but fact checking has grown worldwide. And this chart is by an organization called the Duke Reporters Lab, and it just shows how fast this has happened in the past 4 years. They counted more than 300 fact checking organizations globally at the end of last year, 2020. As Hazel said, fact-checking peaks tend to follow the news cycle, and unfortunately, false information and also conspiracy theories are more and more common around major news stories, as we saw in the US elections, and we've seen in numerous situations, particularly obviously regarding the COVID epidemic, which has now just become, you know, since the beginning, it has sort of been the major source of what we're looking at, because there's just so much misinformation out there. We fact-checked more than 4,000 specific COVID-related claims since the start of since late 2019, And in the early days, a lot of the misinformation we saw was focused on ways to cure or prevent COVID. And now a lot of it is obviously related to the safety and efficacy of vaccines. And there's an incredible amount of disinformation out there on that theme. Coming back to what Hazel said, a lot of the false posts we see and that we're focusing on, I mean, when we're talking about visual posts, they're pretty unsophisticated. I mean, there has been this big fear of, sophisticated deep fakes, etc. And really, I don't know if I can give a percentage, but a very large part of the information the misinformation that we're focusing on is very basic stuff that anyone can put together. This example here, just to show how it travels very fast as well. This was a cure of a false cure of gargling with salt water or vinegar to cure COVID, and we saw it in at least 9 different languages. I'm sure it appeared in many more. The other thing I just wanted to highlight in terms of the context of our work is the problem that is compounded by media organizations not checking their facts. This story, this picture here is graphic images of a man covered in blood and sores that was shared on social media, but it was also shared in the Daily Mail and in media reports around the world, claiming to show a man in a mummified state rescued after spending some time in a bear cave in Russia. And the claim is completely false, but it's actually someone with a chronic skin condition receiving treatment in Kazakhstan in a hospital. And how did it end up on social media? It was a surgeon had filmed it and sent it to his friends, and then somehow it got out there and become a story worldwide. Coming to how we approach fact checking, we're looking for impact of stories. I mean, there is so much misinformation out there. How do we decide? We look at impact, and particularly, obviously, if there's some kind of harmful, real world harm that could really be damaging or even deadly. And around COVID-19, we've seen that. I mean, I'm sure you've all seen that, how false cures have been spread around, some of them obviously by well-known politicians, but they have actually led to people falling sick or even dying. Now, coming on to the tools that we use, we use a number of tools to monitor, but we also rely a lot on the public and getting tip-offs from our own journalists and also from people who we reach out to on our social media channels. One thing that we still don't have that we would find extremely useful would be some kind of tool to help us group similar requests from the public on different platforms. I mean, we're experimenting with this, but to have this in a more systematic way so that we could see similar requests that were gaining traction, and also ways to reply en masse to things that we'd already fact checked. You still need a human being in the process, and that's something that I would just repeat. But you definitely, it could be helpful to have a machine helping to deal with just the scale of what's going on. So yeah, what are we looking at? In terms of tools that we need and we want, the origin is the key thing, and one of our main challenges is just the origin of something that's posted online. There are obviously a lot of tools out there, and some of them are free. We use some really good free tools, and I'm going to go through a few of the tools that we use. We only use a fraction of everything that's out there, but we also share them a lot with our journalists who are not working on fact checking, because we find that they're extremely in demand, and people are very, very keen to get a little bit of knowledge, at least, of some of the basic tools that we use to verify information online. So I was just going to show you a short extract from a video that we made for our journalists about one of the basic fact-checking tools that Hazel already mentioned that probably you all know already, but anyway, reverse image search. So I'll show you that now.
Sorry, we don't hear, or I don't hear any sound. I'm not sure what it's like everywhere else.
You don't hear the sound? Whoop. Let me see if I can.
Let me just check in the chat if somebody else.
No, if you don't,
I didn't.
See if I can start it again.
No, other people couldn't hear as well.
You know what? I'm going to stop the share and I'll come back to share.
People are saying they can see the captions,
but they can't hear it. Well, maybe that's okay. Is that all right? I mean, you can follow it, right? With the
if there's captions, that should
there
be.
are captions throughout. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, somebody's saying you need to unplug your earphones maybe to get the sound.
No, it doesn't make one. Whoops. Okay, sorry. I'm going to stop the screen share. I'm going to come back with a new one. I think it will. Okay, sorry about that. I now can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, well, I think
it's the first image. Yeah.
I was going to show you another one. There will be sound for the next one. I've worked out. There you go. Okay, so moving on. We're talking about monitoring and CrowdTangle, which is pretty much one of the key tools that we use. As Hazel said, it's owned by Facebook now. But CrowdTangle, there are loads of different things that we use it for. Monitoring lists. Twitter as well we use for lists. But on CrowdTangle, we can also monitor Facebook and Instagram and Reddit as well. One thing that we can do on CrowdTangle is that we use a lot is local relevance and local languages. So you can hone your search for particular regions and countries, or specific kinds of media, also for memes, as Hazel said. And we also keep an eye on how posts are performing. Obviously, there's a lot of information we don't know, but it can be helpful, particularly if we see that a post has peaked and it's no longer really being shared that much. We might have another thought about whether we'd actually need to fact check it if it's no longer going viral. So that's something we keep an eye on. In this example, this is from another part of CrowdTangle, showing Facebook posts that were shared in Africa that actually said former US President Donald Trump had made a rambling speech about with racist remarks in it, which could have been true, but actually it wasn't. And in this diagram, you can see how the claim was reposted and then peaked again. In WeVerify, I mean, I'm not going to talk about it in much detail, but it is a really key tool for us. In the same way that reverse image search is a key tool for trying to find the origin of videos online. And in this example, it was a video supposedly showing panic buying in Germany during the pandemic. And in a very quick search, in the same way that you've seen on reverse image search, we could see that it was an old video. It was from January 2011, so it was from way before this pandemic. Other functions that we like and use a lot in WeVerify include in the toolkit, advanced search on Twitter, which does exist elsewhere, but it's very handy to have it all in one place. And looking at the metadata of a picture, if we can get hold of the original picture, obviously, which is unfortunately not always the case. This function as well can be helpful to flip an image that we have used sometimes successfully in fact checks. This picture of Justin Trudeau, supposedly in a story suggesting he'd converted to Islam, was actually from a Halloween party, but it had been flipped. So it was only by flipping it that we could do a reverse image search and find the original. TweetDeck, as I said, is extremely useful in our hunt for the origin of something. I mean, often things are on Twitter, and often by searching by date and location, we can go back and find an original tweet. We did in the case of the fire at Notre Dame. We managed to find the first tweet, and that helped us very easily get in touch with the person who had taken that picture. Now, a second video, we'll see if you have any sound. It's a very short one this time. This is just to show you a little bit about basic geolocation. That's something that we do on a daily basis. And we use various tools, and we do use a lot of Google tools, and we use a lot of Google tools for geolocation. So here's a quick example. So that's just to give you an idea of some of the kind of basic training that we're trying to share with as many of our journalists as we can. Coming on to archiving, as Hazel said, we use archiving tools a lot to help us stop linking to false information when we're writing a fact check and we want to use an example of something online. We try to archive that post so that we don't generate more clicks for the post, that and also to save false claims in case they've been taken offline or modified. The problem is none of these are completely reliable, understandably, as they're often blocked by changes in platforms related to user privacy. But that's something that's very frustrating and something that we really feel is a big challenge. So we monitor a lot of platforms, as I've showed you a little bit with CrowdTangle, TweetDeck. We also work with platforms, particularly as part of Facebook's third-party fact-checking program, as Reuters do. And that's helpful. It helps us to scale up, to get a larger idea of what's going on, and gives us some data about posts which are potentially false, which we then go and check ourselves in any case. But the challenge, I still feel like it's very early days. I mean, we started doing this in 2017, as I said, in France, and now we're working in all these different countries. But many platforms are still really difficult to monitor. There are lots of new ones, and of the ones that have been around for a long time, we find it pretty challenging to monitor what's going on. We often see videos taken down on Facebook if we signal them as part of the third-party fact-checking program, and then we just see them appear 5 minutes later on YouTube or somewhere else. And we saw that a lot in Myanmar during in the past few recent months, but we see that very often, and on TikTok now as well. And finally, just coming on to closed networks and the challenge of closed networks, we've been working on a pilot project with a company called Medam with a tool called Check to set up fact-checking tip lines in India and Brazil on WhatsApp. And these do, as I was saying in the beginning, what we really dream of for all platforms. They help us to automate getting messages to people, sending automatic messages to people who request a fact check, and then sending them fact checks if we've already done one on a specific topic, and spotting trends of people looking for things. And this is helpful as it does save us time, and it is very time consuming to do fact checking. So anything that saves time is always very welcome. And yeah, whichever tools we do use, as I said, it can take a lot of time. And if we're really dreaming, I mean, you were asking us about what we dream of. If we had any kind of forensic tool that could analyze changes made to images online, but that was really foolproof, that would be something we would love. And something that could help us rapidly find the first online version of an image or a video. That's also on our wish list. Thank you.
Okay, super. Thank you very much, Sophie, for this and for sharing your insights. So one takeaway I have is that basically you need to know your tools and your tactics. I'm afraid we don't have time for many questions, but I'd like to ask a question myself and combine that with an audience question. You say, or you said that you share many of the tools and the knowledge with your journalists out there. Question one is, how would you describe the ordinary journalist skill level when it comes to using these tools? Because some of them are quite sophisticated. I mean, you gave some very interesting insights, but still, I think there's still some barrier. And that's question one. And part two that's coming from the audience is, in how far do you involve these sort of journalists on the ground? I mean, AFP has a big network of journalists. How far do you involve them in your work? Or do you work completely in isolation in your team, in the fact-checking department?
Well, for the second question, yeah, we work. I mean, we work very closely with the journalists that we have around the world. So it's a key element to making the process a little bit faster. The fact that we have people who are in different places, who are on the ground, who can sometimes we've even sent people out into the street to go and look at a street sign, or I mean, not just as simple as a street sign, but if it's a story where we have something on the ground, we have someone on the ground, or we can find someone who can go and check, that's so valuable. And so we do that, and it really is something that we're very lucky that we can do, and that's what we really feel makes us stronger and enables us to do as much as we can do. For the first question, is a good question. I mean, it's quite easy to generalize, and it's quite easy to, I mean, I have to say, we hire, like, as I said, we hire a lot of young people, and young people coming in from journalism schools, a lot of them seem to have a lot of very similar training to the kind of basic training that we give. So I feel like in the journalism, if we're just talking about in the journalism community, I feel like that's definitely something, and also perhaps just a different interactions online than perhaps older generations have had. But yeah, the thing that we find really positive is that there's such positive feedback from such an interest, and when we start to explain things, and if we take the time to share information about what we're doing, there seems to be a real appetite for journalists who don't have knowledge to learn more and to at least use basic tools, or at least come to us if they're looking. And the whole thing as well is about collaboration. I mean, that's how we function, and there's so many things that, you know, no one knows all the tools, and everyone has different skill sets that they bring to verifying things. And a lot of the time someone will come in with more experience and they will share their journalism experience, and in return they will get some technical experience from someone who has been focusing on that. So there's still a lot of work to do, but there's generally a big appetite for learning more.
Okay, I'm afraid we have to leave it at that. Thank you very much again, Sophie. Hopefully you're also staying around at least for the next 20 or 30 minutes or so. So if there's any direct questions, people can ask you directly.